Hey, everybody. Really excited for this episode with Brendan Rhim. I've had both the pleasure and punishment of racing against this guy way back from when he was a wee lad racing for Killington Mountain School in the Northeast and been following him for so many years. He really opens up and is really honest about where he's at in cycling. And I absolutely love what he said when I asked him, so what do you really going for right now? So we start off with some rapid fire questions. We talk about his training. What is he doing? We talk about things that he's working on, a little bit of track cycling, living in Europe, what he's chasing, nutrition, and some final words. And whether you are an aspiring young racer trying to get to his level and beyond, or someone who's just trying to improve as a cyclist, there's a lot of little nuggets in here. So Brendan, thanks so much for doing this. This was really great. Truly appreciate your time and sharing your talents with us. Good luck with the rest of the season. We will definitely be rooting for you. Everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.
Welcome, everybody, to the EVOQ Bike Podcast. Super pumped to have Brendan Rhim here. If you've been racing in the U.S. or even just riding a bike and paying attention to racing, you know who this guy is. Huge results. Just from where I'm sitting, I was never super excited to see your name on a reg list at a race because knew it was going to be a punishing day. But we're just going to pull the curtain back a little bit on his training, racing, and just everything bikes. So Brendan, I like to ask people to introduce themselves rather than me put my spin on you. Who is Brendan Rhim?
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on, Brendan.
Thanks for being here.
There's not that many other Brendans, so I appreciate you having me on. So my name's Brendan Rhim. I'm from Norwich, Vermont. I am traditionally a roadie. I grew up in kind of the New England scene, doing some cyclocross, collegiate, even some of the high school racing. But then I went to college and got my undergraduate degree in health science at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. Spent a number of years with the Hincapie program, did a year over in Europe last year, and am now with the Wildlife Generation Continental team.
Very cool. We'll dig into all of that. Just to give people a quick, in case they haven't followed you or don't know much about you, let's do just a quick little rapid fire. There's going to be two answers. You can pick one or go rogue and give me a different answer. So high socks or low socks?
High socks.
High socks. You're going on a long ride. Is it gels and bars or candy and sandwiches?
I think before this year, it would just be whatever I could find at the gas station, Swedish Fish, Haribo, any kind of candy. But I'm starting to move a little bit away from that now that I've been working with the nutritionist.
But we'll have to hit on that for sure. I'm curious.
Trying to get some more solid foods, not just straight sugar.
I want to hear about that. Okay. Speed suit or bibs and jersey?
That's a tough one. I think speed suit, definitely for racing, but training is only bibs and
fair. Tires 25 or 28 width or something different?
I'm definitely leaning towards bigger tires. I wouldn't go bigger than 28 to race on, but in training, I would probably ride on the biggest tires possible.
Okay. Wax chain or like a wet lube?
Oh man, I haven't even used wax yet. I'm not that fancy yet. So just normal lube.
Okay. Tubes or tubeless?
Pretty limited experience with tubeless as well. So I'm probably going to have to go with tubes. I'm one of those guys who's like having a patching party and patching tubes until
I'm not
5 patches on.
I'm not patching, but so many people still give me crap for riding tubes. I'm like, dude, when tubeless goes bad, it's just not fun. And tubes take 5 minutes to change. So anyways, in the gym or not worth it?
Definitely more in the gym as of recently. I used to never do it. Kind of in college, took a couple classes and they're like, you should really be doing this. And yeah, ever since I've done a little bit more and more, worked with a personal trainer. And now that I'm into some of this really high intensity racing, it's all about the gym.
Is you doing like deadlifts and some upper body and squats
and back squats and all sorts of stuff.
Okay. A couple more. Narrow or what I'm just going to call narrow width bars?
This is another one. The track influence is starting to come in.
There you go.
Started doing a little bit narrower, went to 42s this year, and that's still pretty wide. But I'm seeing the track influence on the road, and it's creeping in everywhere. So the trend, I'm going with the trend pretty soon here, and I'll probably be on 40s next year.
Oh, even go 38.
Yeah.
Yeah. So self-coached or coach?
I've been working with the same coach for the last 7 years.
Cool. Give a shout out. Who is that?
Jesse Moore of More Performance from Sacramento, California.
Awesome. And last one, stage race or one day?
I love a good one day. And yeah, stage races have different tactics that sometimes I don't agree with. So I would say one day.
Okay. So let's jump into training. And for people that again don't know Brendan, look up some of these results. I mean, we're talking Tour de Beauce, GC, I think second GC at Joe Martin. And then for people that aren't following pro racing, but are more on like the amateur level, going to Green Mountain, you won that. You won a stage at OKC Pro-Am. I think a stage at Redlands. The reason I want to highlight some of these, this got 2 stages. This guy's won a lot of big races. So in order to do well at a race, you got to be doing something in training. Super open-ended question. I don't want to say the most important aspect of your training, but what's kind of like your bread and butter? What are you doing?
I would say my main thing is consistency. And I know that's kind of a simple answer that you hear from everybody, but in school, I always put riding first. And of course, my grades suffered a little bit from that. But, and especially in school, when you have that kind of structure in your day, riding was the absolute best part of my day. So I would be the kid who was like packing everything in his backpack 10 minutes before class finished because I was just ready to rip across campus and get on my bike and start doing a workout. And that has since changed since I graduated and I have all this free time. But it's like, I love riding my bike. And at the end of the day, if you're riding, you're going to be fast. And if you're not riding, you're not going to be fast.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think even though you say it's like a simple thing, it is talked about, but it's just so important. Just trying to tell people, don't make it 0 minutes, make it 37 minutes. Like I know people are busy, but just get in some type of ride. Mm-hmm. Having a coach, how involved do you like being in selecting those workouts that you're ripping across campus to go do? Or are you more the type of I see this in Training Peaks or whatever software you use, I'm going to go do it. And you don't really not as involved.
I have some pretty strong faith in my coach, Jesse, because we started working together back in the end of 2014. And I just come off of kind of a weird knee injury and just not really having any guidance prior to that. Like I never had a coach before. And I was riding for the U23 development team, Cal Giant at the time. And we just seemed to really click. And he gives enough structure. Well, I should say he gives a lot of structure and it's very intensity based. But I always got the sense with Jesse that things were, there are guidelines and there are certain things he wanted me to do, but it wasn't going to the end of the earth to make sure I would hit the exact number. And his whole thing is ranges, and you don't have to hit exact numbers, but up to you. And really it's about the athlete figuring out on the day what they're capable of and giving the most that their body has to give on that given day. So it's not really, so I'm rambling here a little bit.
No, you're not. No, you're not. These are the Stephen Bassett tangents. Like
tangents. Yeah. It's learning your body and knowing when to push and when not to push. And I think Jesse has given me a really good sense of understanding and knowing my body well enough to know when to push and when not to.
How did he teach you that feeling? I had a good question from a guy that he said, how do you know when you're going to go for a PR? He's like, I see you sometimes on Strava and you go rip a 18-minute climb and you put in the notes. Like I'll usually just talk about my ride a little bit. I'm like, yo, I decided this today, I'm going to go for this KOM. And I said back to him a similar thing, like, well, I was doing like in a 15 to 20 minute range of full gas efforts that day. I was riding up to the climb and I just was like, dude, I feel really good. Like, I'm just going to try and crank this first one out, even if the second one suffers. Whereas other times during a workout, I might be really trying to go for repeatability. And I said, it's really just, I've been doing it for a long time. I kind of just, you have that feeling and you know yourself as an athlete. And I still work with a coach, and my coach kind of knows what I'm doing. And he kind of like lays out, like you said, it was structure, but there's some like, how you doing today? How did he teach you that or get you to that point where you knew that? Or do you think that's just a growing as an athlete type thing?
I'd say the first thing would be the feedback box on training. I mean, we use Training Peaks, but any other software would usually have the same thing. Is he would insist on me writing in even a few sentences, like, how did you feel at the beginning? How did you feel in the efforts? How did you feel at the end of the ride? And that was something he always stressed. Like, I can only tell so much by looking at these numbers. I really need to hear vocally from you. What were you thinking at the beginning of this workout? And then I guess the other thing is he has kind of some structure that he repeats throughout the majority of his workouts. And I'm basically at the point now where I know how that should feel, and I can basically ride the zone blind. Like, I don't need to look at my power meter, and I know, like, this tempo zone that I'm doing, I can pretty much do it blind to this day. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I know when it doesn't feel right, and I know when it feels really good. And it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe the power meter is wrong because I feel too good for this number to be right. That kind of thing.
Yeah. When you talk about intensity, are you go a little more granular on that? Is it a lot of intensity in every session? Is it more like some people now are polarized, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely polarized. Intensity in that it's a lot of subthreshold. There's not a whole lot of high intensity in terms of intervals. And I should say, I don't do many intervals. They're just timed segments of lower intensity that's somewhere between high intense or threshold and endurance. They're not, as an example, I rarely do VO2s. Like, I think I've gone a couple years where I've done maybe 1 or 2 VO2 workouts. And that's the maximum. And I don't know if this is just a reflection of who I am as a racer, but I'm definitely the kind of person who can race way harder than they train. And if I were to get myself to do race efforts and training all the time, I think I would be lacking on come race day.
100%. I agree with that. And if you look, you race a lot. And I looked back at a couple of years. I mean, you were in Vermont, but like, I guess maybe in the past, I was looking back, maybe it was probably the Hincapie days. Like, you were starting in February and it was like, boom, 42 events in, I don't know, maybe it was like 6 months. There's a lot of racing. So there's not a ton of time for you to be cranking VO2 max stuff. And I would be curious to ask your coach that, because that's what Robin Carpenter said the same thing. I said, well, do you think that's just because you're naturally gifted with VO2? He said, good question. Yeah, probably that. And so he doesn't do, he said the same exact thing, actually. So do you do much like hard, keep it to road racing? This might change, or does this change with the track racing now? Do you do any anaerobic stuff, or is this like mostly volume, go ride your bike a lot?
Yes, but I actually, and again, working with Jesse, I don't do that much volume. I think one of the biggest weeks that he gives me is 25 hours.
That's a lot of riding.
Yeah, 25 is a lot, but I'm not one of those guys who does 30 or 30. Like, I think the only time I've done a 30-hour week is in a Hincapie training camp. And we were really pushing each other. Yeah. But that's just the only week out of the year where that's happened. So yeah, it's a lot of this sub-threshold kind of tempo. And then we do a fair amount of kind of shorter again, I don't want to use the word intervals, but timed segments of either practicing certain positions on the bike, because everything is specificity, and dealing with different terrain that you're going to be riding on, if you're on a time trial bike, if you're climbing, whatnot. So yeah, it's I would say it's a lot of it is drill based more so than intensity based, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to get this guy on the podcast and just talk
Yeah.
about training
Oh, he's
methodology and thoughts.
super interesting guy.
Okay, awesome. So do you have a favorite workout with him or something that you're just like, ooh, I love going to do this? Because your answer is gonna be totally different than what most people say. Because I'm thinking of, like, I do intervals and I like doing intervals. So I'm curious, what like gets you, all right, I'm going to do this today?
There's well, obviously there's some workouts that are easier than others, but one of the ones that's hard, but I actually really enjoy it, is it's what he calls a break point ride, where you're basically just looking for cardiac drift over a certain period of time. And it's one of those days where you kind of go out and you're just on the pedals and you're hammering the whole day. I shouldn't say totally hammering, but by the end it feels like you're hammering. And it's one of those days where you really get to see where you're at. And it's kind of an off season, just getting into like December, January time of the year. And you really get a sense of what your body's ready to do or capable of at the moment. So it's just one of those days that one of the workouts that doesn't come along very often that I really look forward to, because it's hard, but it's really rewarding when you finish it and you're like, wow, that was hard, but I like the number that I saw.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that, the idea of that. And yeah, I'm like, dude, let's call this guy. We got to get him on this podcast. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like an interesting coach for sure. So do you have a main limiter that you're working on, and how would you go about working that? Or maybe said differently, when you're coming up in the road scene, was there anything that you guys were like, this is why I'm in 7th in this race? How do we go and change this?
I wouldn't say that there's ever been one thing. I think, if anything, I'd always convinced myself that I wasn't able to sprint. And even now I would say that I'm not, obviously I'm not a true sprinter, but it took, I would say, probably doing some collegiate racing, kind of building up some confidence. And then when I joined the Hincapie program, one of the things that stuck with me and is still stuck with me to this day, the director, Thomas Craven, telling me, hey man, you can sprint. Like you can do this. You just go fast. Just go faster than the other guys. Just pedal harder, which it seems like such a simple, silly thing to say. But I just grew up as a junior who was like just strong and just a big guy who was strong. And then you get into some races where, you have to play out the finish and you have to actually sprint. And then you realize, okay, I can do this. So I'd say we never really went after it specifically. And one of my interests in track is that it's higher intensity and could potentially open a door to figure out if I am really a sprinter at heart. But just a couple interesting conversations over the years where I don't have one specific thing that I'm really good at or really bad at. Obviously I'm not going to win the Tour de France. I'm not 7 watts a kilo guy, but I've been told from doing some physio testing that there's not really, from a physiological side, there's not anything lacking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's not really a weakness.
I read an old interview that you had done, and I was actually going to bring this up because you had made a comment about when they were telling you, like, hey man, you're pretty damn good at this biking thing. And it changed your approach to the season and how you mentally looked at the races. And so I'm assuming confidence would be a huge aspect to that. And you had said, hey, I'm not going to be afraid to take risks or race aggressively. I still have to be careful though. What was that? Was that just a confidence thing? And kind of like, okay, I'm at this level, I need to really, no pun intended, attack it? Or what were you kind of thinking? What changed besides just that vote of confidence?
Yeah, I'm curious. What year was that interview from? Do you know?
It was I want to say it was,
Because it's definitely evolved. It's really evolved for me.
because I think it was somebody that did 2 interviews. It might be someone in Norwich, I think I found. And they had, I don't know if they interviewed you or if they recorded another interview you did, but let's talk about the evolution.
Probably college. Yeah. So I think in college, I had a really successful freshman year when I was still on the development team. And I was in the mindset that I was invincible, which I guess is the plague of every 19-year-old. And yeah, I took a lot of that confidence into my racing, and I had a really successful year up until, I'm guessing it was kind of summer, June, July, and then I got my first taste of altitude training and all that stuff, and I was in deep water. I didn't know what I was doing, and it all kind of backfired. And then I went to Europe and had this awful crash, and that also really set me back confidence-wise and fitness-wise. But so yeah, I'd say the years after kind of my coming out, I would say it really took a while for me to gain my confidence back. So I'd say that 2016, I was just afraid and didn't really know what I was doing, got kind of roped into normal college life and not really focusing as much on racing just because I'd really been dealing with a lot of these lasting injuries from 2015. And it wasn't really until 2017 that I started getting some of that confidence back. And something I keep reading about and hearing people talk about is momentum and kind of the psychological side of small successes and how small successes build into bigger ones. And especially in endurance sports, there's so much suffering and so much kind of pain that you put yourself through that you need to see small bits of progress if you're going to keep pushing the envelope, or I should say pushing the ceiling. And it wasn't really until 2017 that I got into U23 nationals with like a bunch of solid racing in my legs, and then showed up and had a really good day in the road race at U23 nationals. And I was like going to the finish with Johnny Brown, Gage Hecht, and Nielsen Powless, who ended up winning the race. And, to this day, this is probably the one race that I regret the most of how it played out. But in hindsight, it was like, wow, okay. And especially now, seeing where some of these guys are, it's like, wow, I can race with these guys when I'm at my best. I can still do this. It's been like 2 years since I had this horrific injury. And then going into 2018, I just had the confidence and was surrounded by a really good support system. We were Pro Conti in 2018. So everything you can think of, Swanee's staff, all the best equipment, team managers, even sports performance guy, Bobby Julik. So we just, and obviously also having really strong teammates raises your ability to get results. And I think my 2018 season racing in the US really was evidence of that, just surrounded by strong teammates and really working for each other, and came out really swinging. And I would say 2018, 2019, same thing, like confidence was good, racing basically at the best of my ability. And then 2020 happens and everything kind of gets thrown out the window, where I've kind of convinced myself that, if I hadn't made it by now, I'm 23 or I'm 24. This is what most Euros and teams will tell you, is once you're out at U23s, you're going to have a really, really hard time making it to the World Tour, making it in Europe, making it at the highest level, essentially, of road cycling. And so 2020 was kind of this panicked year where, I'd done everything. If we had raced in 2020, I'm convinced that I would have gotten some big results, but we didn't get to race. And I just spent the whole year sitting on the couch, really kind of cursing myself. But obviously way bigger things at play in the world. So 2020 or 2021, I said, okay, I'm going to completely flip the script and I'm going to do something totally out of the ordinary. And I'm, you hear these stories of Matteo Jorgensen, these other guys who just pick up and move to France and learn a new language, and they make it. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do that. Because I was still pretty confident and basically went into 2021 and just had all of that confidence blown out the window. And part of it is the racing over there is really hard. But being away for a long time, being away from home for a really long time will do it. Being in some different cultures and just having teammates who don't speak English, it's just all very unfamiliar, and it really tested my ability to be confident and continue to race at a high level. And I think I did okay with it. And I think there were a couple races later in the year where it kind of came through, and I say I'm proud of one result from 2021. It's like this little kermesse that I did in Izehem, Belgium. And I'm looking at it now, I was 19th. It's like not a significant result by any means, but we're in there and we're racing against all the best Belgian kermesse guys. Like Quickstep is in there. There's a Lotto Soudal guy. There's Alpecin guys. And I think it was the first time, and maybe the only time in 2021, where I was like, wow, I can actually do this. Like I can race with these guys. And I ended up having some mechanical issues at the end, but it was like, okay, like I'm not as bad as I thought I was for the whole year. And it finally started to click again. And I was like, okay, clearly I'm not quite cut for this living full-time in Belgium thing, but I can still cut it in some of these races. I just need some of those smaller victories to build up to something bigger. And that's when I decided, I clearly need to come back to the US, race with Wildlife, who were so generous to bring me back after having such a terrible year. And so, yeah, with Wildlife, I've had a much easier transition back in with guys that I know, guys that I was teammates with in the past, and just having some smaller races to kind of build up my confidence again and say, all right, like I can keep doing this. I'm able to do it. I'm able to compete. And yeah, the level definitely increased after the pandemic. So that's also been a thing I think everyone's dealt with. Is it's not that it was easy before, but there's just the level is so high, so much higher and so much deeper now. So you have to really be on it.
Why do you think that is post-pandemic?
I think, and speaking with random guys that I've met, even some of the guys that are here with me now at this camp, they're guys that either didn't ride a bike before or had stopped riding a bike. And 2020 was just a year where people were experimenting either with themselves or with what they were interested in, or they just started doing new things. The whole bike boom, people were buying bikes like crazy. So you have all these people getting into gravel and starting to do Zwift races, and there's this whole new influx of people. And I guess this is with any sport, is the more people you have at the grassroots level joining, it's just going to raise the level further up the pyramid. So I think people had time to experiment and do Everesting and dial in their nutrition, and they're away from school, or they're taking classes at home and they had more time to train. Like, it just, all these things have led to people really raising their game, raising the level. So the level is definitely a little bit higher.
That's interesting. Yeah. The pandemic has definitely changed, even from like business people learning that they don't have to go to all these meetings and they can, do Zooms and be at home. And I think what we're going to look back on what it changes. I don't even know if we've seen the full effect of it yet, but it's going to be really interesting on society as a whole. It's interesting to hear that weave into athletics and you seeing it firsthand. So talking about the being abroad in Europe, did you feel like an outsider there at all? It's actually interesting. When we were talking about that whiteface race early on, Andrew, who won that year, he was on my team. I think you came in third, and he went over to France. And his biggest thing was, I forget what the team name was over there. He's like, man, my teammates were great, but similar to what you were saying, he's like, I didn't speak French. I was in a super tiny town. I didn't learn it fast enough, and I kind of just was out there on my own. And I don't know, did you have a similar experience, or what was the vibe like? Because I know a lot of kids that are going over, there's like the Belgian racing. That's something that not many of them have outlet to learn about before they get there. How did that play out for you?
I don't think I could pinpoint it to one thing, but obviously the big cultural difference, something as simple as not being able to read a town sign, not being able to understand the announcer when they're talking at team presentation or on the start line saying certain things. And I really made an effort to learn some Flemish, and it did help, but we raced in other countries. And I was going to say, I had great teammates. So, and I'd say 75% of them, or I'd say most of them, spoke really good English. So that wasn't really an issue either. It was being far away from home. I don't know. Everyone, especially in the racing, there's no sense of, oh, he doesn't belong, they don't belong. If anything, it was more that the bigger teams don't like the smaller teams. That much is very evident. But no one can tell what country you're from when you're racing in a jersey. Maybe something like Human Powered Health would have to deal with that because they're very clearly a North American team in Europe. But I was on an Irish team, or an Irish licensed team, living in Belgium. So we were very much like one of the local teams at that point. So, yeah, I don't know if it's just the unfamiliarity of the culture, but no, it's definitely cutthroat, and there's definitely a sense that you really have to be. There's no sitting back, and every second of the race is important. And I think the big difference between U.S. and European racing is that there tends to be, in the U.S., there's more of a flow to the race where it might be hard, but then there's going to be an easy part where not much happens, and then it gets hard again. Whereas in Europe, there can be some of that in the bigger stage races, but especially in the local or the smaller, we call it amateur racing, even though their amateur level of racing is so high. Just chaos and no control. It's always going. You have to be turned on for every single second of the race, which is like a mental fatigue that I don't think goes appreciated. I think the likening is the last 5 laps of a crit. That's what it's like for the first hour of a kermesse, and even in the middle part. It could be like that the whole race, and we're talking about a 4-hour race. And so the mental toll that takes on you is just, it's a lot.
That's crazy. So you brought up the great point of when people are saying, hey, once you get out of U23, if you're not at the top, it's going to be really hard for you to get at the top. So you're not in U23. Not to put some expression is, but like, where are you looking? What's your move? What are you thinking down the road? You're with Wildlife now. Is the track involved in this plan? And if you don't want to share this, you don't have to.
Yeah. And that is one of the things that they really drill home. I say they is most directors, or if you ever talk to an agent, or if you ever talk to a rider who's older, they'll say, they really set this cutoff date of 23, 24. And I think it made me really anxious all my U23 years, just thinking about this, like, oh, I have to do it. I have to make it before this point, or else it's kind of over. And I guess seeing some slightly older guys like Travis McCabe, like James Pickley, make it at a later part in their career was encouraging. And then you see all these World Tour teams signing 18-year-olds, and you're like, well, are Travis and James just outliers, or how is this really going? So I definitely had to come to terms with, if I were to ever make it, I'm clearly not going to be on the traditional path. But yeah, it has also been kind of this slow evolving thing where I'm like, all right, so I don't think I'm going to make it World Tour, but there's still some races over there that I'd like to do and be competitive in. And, being a World Tour rider is not necessarily my dream anymore. But I think what I would be most content with is getting to a point where I can be on a team that races some of those high level races, and feeling like I maximized my potential. And at the moment, it has felt like some things went wrong for me. I had an injury, I got sick, whatever, and I just wasn't able to show up and perform the best that I could on the day. And that has been frustrating, but that's also the reality of sport. And, the best guys show up on the day that matters, on the day that counts, in their best fitness. And that's what makes them great. So I guess that's the thing I'm still chasing, is getting the absolute most of myself and knowing that I got to the limit of what I'm capable of. So that's the thing I'm chasing.
Dude, that's awesome. I absolutely love that. And that resonates, will resonate with so many people, and not even speaking about people at your level, but a lot of us in the US, we find cycling later in life, and people get into the sport. They do a grand final, they do everything. They kind of find racing, and they're like, oh, damn, this is really hard. But then they get ninth, and they're like, oh, maybe I'll keep going. Then somebody catches the bug, and they're 35, and they're like, well, where am I going with this? It's like, dude, are you having fun? Are you pushing yourself? Are you getting better? Like the journey and just trying to squeeze out what you can is the most fun aspect of this. I mean, I think everyone will have a result that absolutely shocks them. And actually, you're in a great story of this. My buddy Patrick Wally at Tour of Southern Highlands, you probably don't even remember or care about this race, but I don't know if he beat you in a sprint, but you were on the podium with him and he won. And dude, we went crazy when we heard that you were in the race and he won. And it's just how much we respect you as a bike racer. And we were all like, oh my God, I can't believe you won that race. But that's what everybody should be going after. Like, if you're an amateur athlete, if you're a dad of 4 kids, whatever, like, go for that feeling. And it's awesome to hear you just trying to squeeze out your absolute best at such a ridiculously high level. So is this where the track comes into play a little bit, or what? Did you just catch a vibe from somebody? Like, I'm going to go check this out.
Yeah. And actually I remember this race that he did. I do remember that. That was, I can't remember what was going on. But,
don't tell us that you like misshift or that you had like
pneumonia. No. I got beat. I'm unafraid to tell you that I got beat when I got beat. I was like, wait, how did this happen? What happened?
That's literally.
And I think USAC used to have a rule about not allowing Conti riders or higher to do local races. And to me, it was like, well, it defeats the whole purpose. Like, you want these guys in the race because you need the younger guys to be able to aspire to something and to know where they are relative. So, and anytime I see a younger guy or anybody who's kind of new to the sport come in and, you can tell they've really got it, or they get a result and you're like, wow, that was really impressive. Obviously I wish there were more teams to be able to say like, hey, you should really sign this person. But no, I'm never opposed to seeing those guys win, because it's all about people getting those unexpected results, which is one of the things I love so much about cycling.
And to your point, that's the thing that I remember and I don't know if that lasted long, but when it was like Conti people shouldn't be at local races, like, no, anybody who's actually trying to squeeze the most out of them, we're like, no, let them come. Like, I want to be able to go race Robin Carpenter, and he wins 99 times, but there might be that one time, and I'm like, damn, dude, Robin, what's up, dude? How you doing down there?
And you see him on TV at these races, winning stages of the biggest races, and you're like, all right, like, let's actually find out if I can roll the dice with Robin and like stay with him on a climb. Like, you want to know that rather than not know that. And I guess it's a different mindset if you just want to win the local race and you don't care who's there. But yeah, to me, it's like I want to race against the quick step riders. Like, I want to know where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And if they drop me, that's fine. Like, they're on quick step. That's the whole point. I love that. Yeah.
So track, tell me about this.
Track. All right. So track, for me, I guess it would start last year. I was on a team with primarily Irish riders, and a bunch of them come from a track background. And and again, as most people will tell you about sports, is the Olympics were going on last summer. They were. That was last summer.
Yeah.
And we ended up watching a couple of the events, and the guys were like, oh, you're a tall guy, you're a big guy, like you do well on the track. Like, it can translate well, and you learn a lot of skills, and it can really translate well to road, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So I started kind of looking into it, and just on a whim in the off season this past winter, I reached out to Grant Kuntz, who we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
And Grant had been pursuing the track thing for a year or two. And at the moment he's like full bore, all in on track. And I was like, hey man, I heard something about track tryouts or like some kind of camp going on where they might do some kind of selection and get that, the Olympics are over and there's generally a turnover, and then they start building towards the next games and whatnot. And Grant was like, yeah, give me your email. We'll send it over to this guy, and this guy will give you this, and we'll try and get you to the camp. So just like shot in the dark, email this guy, and he's like, yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you at Colorado Springs in 2 weeks. I was like, okay.
Damn.
So I'd recently moved to Colorado, but I was like, okay, I guess we're going down there in a couple of weeks, and we'll just see how it goes. So I think the camp, it was basically a talent ID camp with 20 or so young men, we'll call them, because I was one of the oldest guys there. And same deal here at the training center. And we did some on-track experience, some standing starts, some drills, motor pacing behind a bike on the velodrome. And then the main thing was the power testing in the lab that we did. Because they've got one of those altitude chambers where they can change it up and down however they want. So apparently I was good. And they're like, all right, we'd love to have you back. We're doing another thing in January. And so I ended up going to another camp in January before the start of the road season in Portugal. And I was with Gavin Hoover, reigning UCI, I think it's like an invite only. I think it's called the Champions League.
Okay.
So Gavin is like big shot track racer these days. Gavin Hoover. Magnus Sheffield, who's on Ineos.
Yep.
Colby, I didn't get his name wrong. Colby Lang. Colby Lang, who'd been with the track program as well in the past years, men's team pursuit. Iman Lucas, it's like a California guy who's like permanently living in Belgium. Eddie Huntsman, who's like one of the younger guys who's always kind of been a track guy. He rides for Butcher Box. And then I'm going to forget who else was there, but I believe that was it. Colby, Magnus, Iman, Eddie, me, and Gavin. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was us, the six of us. And Rob Stanley, the current men's endurance program director. And so we had I think it was 10 days or something in Portugal at one of the kind of fancy 250 meter wooden indoor tracks in San Galhos, Portugal, near Porto. But it's just kind of a new experience thing, getting used to the indoor track, because the main thing they say about track is that every velodrome is different. So it's really about getting experience on different types of tracks, because no two tracks are the same. And yeah, from there, again, I think it went pretty well. And I guess long-term, they're just trying to build a program to win as many medals as possible in LA in 2028. And that is ultimately what USA Cycling is trying to do. It's all about as many medals as possible for LA.
That's interesting.
And yeah, I think it's definitely realistic with some of the guys that we have, or that are in the program. And I think they're still, you know, they're not too close-minded, and they're going to keep their eyes open for anybody else who's interested. But yeah, I'm definitely interested. And it, you know, you get access to all the OTC things, and you get to spend time with some of these other amazing athletes who've really carved their own corner, like Gavin has. He's another really interesting guy that would be worth having a long chat with. And then, yeah, obviously Magnus is a super talent. So,
yes,
yeah.
I'll hit you up later to hear more about Gavin, or get his, if you can pass a word of positivity along rather than me just blindsiding him. I felt like I kind of knew you when I hit you up. I was like, maybe he recognized my name. I don't know. We'll see. I'll see if he'll come on the podcast.
Of course.
I really like that, carving out your corner. I think that's a really good thing for, again, like not just pro athletes, but athletes at the amateur level, because it is now, especially now, there's gravel, there's crit scene's big, roads kind of in a weird place, you know, cyclocross has its little corner, but find something that you're having fun with, go after it, squeeze the most out of yourself, as you're saying. I think it's a really good thing to keep in mind along the journey, because the journey can get weird when you're really into cycling. Like, you know, you have those bad times like, damn, why am I doing this? Like, I got to find the fun in this again. And that's really important.
Yeah. And I guess that is also part of it. Was I'd been doing road for so long, and I used to do some cyclocross, and I haven't done cyclocross in a couple of years. I was like, I think I need to find something new to keep it fresh and alive in my mind. And track has really, really done that, because it's super, like, you really have to be focused and really dialed in, because again, it's kind of like the last couple laps of a crit. You really have to focus, and there's no zoning out on the track. It's 100% concentration.
It's interesting. It definitely intrigues me. I have to get over the driving to ride thing, but I'm sure you just get used to it like anything else.
Mm-hmm.
With the essence of time, I don't want to take up your whole day. Let's just, if we can quickly hit on, you brought up the nutrition earlier on. What's been the progression of you from, let's say, first days as a pro and then up to now? Were you just kind of doing whatever you can find at the gas station, as you said, for real all the time? Or what's the trajectory of the nutrition in your performance been?
Well, to start, I'd say in high school, I just ate a trough of cereal every morning, as my mom would say. So it just went from like Wheaties and Rice Krispies in the biggest bowl you've ever seen, and milk every morning. And
Grant might still be doing this. He's still
there are plenty of guys who still do it. And not to say that it doesn't work, but I think if you're trying to target a really specific event, then you might want to reconsider the trough method. But yeah, I think it's progressed, and I think I've had a relatively good relationship with food, especially as a larger rider or a taller guy. There's a lot of pressure in the road world to be as skinny as possible. And I definitely found that out the hard way in 2016, I think. You know, it's just all over the place that year.
Just too light.
Yeah, post injury, I was like, oh, well, maybe if I just get skinny, I'll be fast. And I think I got down into like 167, 168, or 168 pounds, and to put that in perspective, when I won the Tour Post, I was 176. I was almost 10 pounds heavier. So,
wow.
Yeah, I definitely found out the limit of how skinny I can be.
How tall are you?
I am 6'3", 190 centimeters.
What do you think is your best race weight? With 176 of Bose, we know 167 is too light. Where do you like to be at these days?
I think right in that 175, 177 range is probably where I'm optimal on the road, at least. I think it's different on the track and in other disciplines, but yeah, I definitely found out the hard way because I just felt miserable and tired and sluggish all the time that year when I was too light. And then, I had some really good influences and teammates. John Murphy notably told me one year on Hincapie, he was like, man, if you just eat as much as you can and you've always got food in your belly and you're happy, you're going to race well. And I had that attitude in 2018 and it worked really well. And then I think in 2019, we just did so many race days that I naturally slimmed out an extra pound or two. And that just translated into really, really high level fitness. So yeah, I just try and stay in that range, but ultimately you can't really just look at the number, is what I've come to learn, is that it's more about how you're feeling and what your needs are based on the workouts that you're doing. If you're only looking at the number, then you're going to be pretty misguided.
And when you're saying the number, meaning just the pound number, or you?
Yeah, the number on the scale.
I think also for like macros, people that get in like, oh, I burn 2,000 kgs, I need 2,000 this. I'm like, well, what if you're like your body's repairing and you just also rode 4 hours the day before, and like it's just the numbers and the metrics are great, but we're a human being. There's a lot of stuff going on that we can't take into account.
Yeah, I think the takeaway that I've had the big takeaway I've gotten so far working with my nutritionist is that you should have a baseline, and that there's a set amount of food that you eat that you never go below. And then you tailor everything supplemental or additional to that based on what you're doing on a given day. So I don't know, and this probably varies person to person, but your rest day baseline is your baseline. And then you kind of go from there based on training, how much you're training, how hard you're training. And then food during the day, during workout, all that kind of stuff is just in addition to that baseline. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, if you keep the baseline, you should be all right.
Very cool, man. This was awesome. I really appreciate you doing this. This is really insightful to you. I mean, just one absolute hitter that so many people are looking up to and following you, man. And I hope you realize how many people you have definitely motivated and inspired through your racing. It's really awesome. So wishing you the best of luck on the track. And with what do you guys got going on with wildlife for the rest of the year? So if you're there now, are you done with road?
No, I'm still going to be balancing the remainder of the year. There's a possibility of the Tour of Portugal. We're not entirely sure yet. And then later in the season, some guys will do the Baltimore race. I'm not sure if I will or not. It's still a little ways out, but there's Tour of Romania, Tour of Serbia, hopefully Tour of Langkawi at the end of the year, or Japan Cup.
So still a lot of things kicking around.
Yeah, there's a lot of things kicking on, and all in the midst of that, there's track, there's Pan Ams, there's World Champs, there's a whole host of other things. So
Sick.
All to be determined. I don't know yet.
Any final parting words or things you need to share with people that follow you and are super inspired by you?
I would say don't expect to follow the traditional path, and if you're focused on what so many other people have done, you may miss an opportunity that's staring you right in the face.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing this. Everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll post Brendan's Instagram, and I'll get other socials or other things that he posts up to and put them in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.